الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله صلى الله عليه وعلى آله وأصحابه ومن سار على سبيله إلى يوم الدين أما بعد. So as we continue discussing the book Bulugh al-Maram by Hafiz Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani rahimahullah, and we're still discussing matters pertaining to Kitab at-Tahara, and in specific where he discussed concerning matters of Nawaqil al-Wudu. So Bab, Nawaqil al-Wudu, things that nullifies one wudu. So today we're picking up from the hadith that we have discussed last week that discusses matter regarding of those things that are conditional, that a person should be in a certain state of state of Tahara in fulfilling a certain acts of ibadah. So we discuss of those things that is requirement according to some of the ulama, majumur of the ulama, that a person should be in a state of tahara, which is the person touching and carrying of the mushaf. So today, inshallah ta'ala, we will picking up and discussing the hadith that follows. And so as for the next hadith that is mentioned, that is the hadith of Aisha radiallahu anha, we'll mention the hadith and then we'll pick up regarding the ahkam that can be taken from the hadith. Tafaddal.
Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa sallallahu wa sallam ala nabiyyina Muhammad. Kitab the Book of Purification, Hadith number 73. Narrated Aisha radiallahu anha, Allah's Messenger sallallahu alayhi wa sallam used to mention Allah's name at all times. Reported by Muslim, Al-Bukhari recorded it as mu'allaq, broken chain from the side of the hadith collector.
So this is the hadith that we'll be discussing today regarding of those matters that relates to at-tahara, by way of tahara is considered to be of those that is a requirement regarding the person fulfilling of certain acts. So they mentioned regarding concerning the hadith, with the hadith that I mentioned here, and Aisha radiallahu anha قالت كان رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم يذكر الله على كل أحيانه رواه مسلم وعلقه البخاري. So the hadith here that we have been mentioned is the hadith of Aisha radiallahu anha, and we have mentioned so regarding concerning the tartib, the method that we follow, that we'll discuss something regarding the Sahabi or the narrator of the hadith. So in this case, Aisha radiallahu anha, al-Mu'mineen, that we have mentioned something of Aisha previously, so no need to return that or mentioned much, as Aisha radiallahu anha, as we know to be the wife of the Prophet ﷺ, and also of those who are of the female who have narrated most of the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ by way of the female, and also she's considered to be of those of the mukthirin, those who have narrated many hadith that exceed thousands. Then she mentioned regarding concerning of things that she have observed. So regarding the Prophet ﷺ, regarding that, he would always be mentioned as subhanahu wa ta'ala in all affairs. So as for the next matter to be discussed is regarding takhrij of the hadith. So as for takhrij of the hadith, that as mentioned here by Sheikh, so we have, as we'll normally sometimes mention, comparison between two of the books who have made takhrij or editing of the book of Bulugh al-Maram. So the first one being that of Sheikh Samir Zuhair rahimahullah, or rahimahullah, in his particular checking of this book, when he mentioned this hadith of Aisha radiallahu anha, then of the thing that he mentioned regarding number 4, he mentioned the hadith, he mentioned number 4. Then as for the source, he mentioned the hadith, as he stated here, Sahih, the hadith is authentic. علقه Bukhari, that Bukhari rahimahullah mentioned with the ta'liq chain, that he mentioned وصله al-Muslim, وصله Muslim, that Muslim, that he mentioned the hadith with a complete chain, meaning wasala, that he mentioned the hadith with a complete chain. That's concerning what he mentioned regarding this particular hadith, which is that editing of Bulugh al-Maram. Then as for another editing of the book of Bulugh al-Maram, the checking by Sheikh Al-Fahl, Mahir Al-Fahl, when he mentioned regarding this particular hadith, that he mentioned the hadith as being number 2 in his book, meaning footnote number 2. He mentioned Sahih, meaning hadith is authentic. Akhrajahu, that hadith it is collected by Ahmed, wa Muslim and Muslim, wa Abu Dawood. Abu Dawood also collected the hadith. Ibn Majah, the hadith also is Ibn Majah. At-Tirmidhi, Abu Yala, Abu Awana, Ibn Hibban, Abu Naim, wal Bayhaqi, wal Bagawi. So these are the sources that I've mentioned this hadith. So he mentioned here several or many sources of those Ahmed also, and normally he will mention them in the order of their birth regarding that he mentioned that Ahmed, then he mentioned Muslim, then he mentioned Abu Dawood, Ibn Majah, Tirmidhi, Abu Yala, Abu Awana, Ibn Hibban, Abu Na'im, then Bayhaqi and Al-Baghawi. So these are of those sources that some that have mentioned this hadith. So this hadith, it is found in these sources. Also Bukhari rahimahullah mentioned the hadith, but also with a broken chain. So that's concerning of the general overall tahrij of the hadith in brief. So the hadith is found in many books. Many books of hadith have mentioned this particular hadith. Then he mentioned akhrajahu. Then also I mentioned akhrajahu at the end regarding Al-Bukhari. Mu'allakan, they mention Aqaba hadith, kalata, such and such, and they mention Mu'allakan. And Bukhari rahimahullah, I mentioned the hadith Mu'allakan. So that's concerning regarding what has been stated regarding this particular hadith, regarding sources that have collected this hadith from the A'imma. So the hadith is found in Muslim, also Bukhari, but with a Mu'allakan chain. Then also is found in other books of those, Abu Dawood with a full complete chain, Tirmidhi, Ibn Majah, and others who have collected this hadith. So regarding concerning what is mentioned by Sheikh Fawzan, or Sheikh Abdullah Fawzan, Hafidullah, in his explanation of Bulugh al-Maran, that he mentioned regarding concerning hadith, وهذا hadith أخرجه Imam Muslim, or Imam Muslim rahimahullah. So the hadith in the Imam Muslim, and he mentioned the Bab al-Hayd, and he mentioned the Isnad, that is mentioned by Imam Muslim rahimahullah, where he mentioned the Isnad of Imam Muslim, and Tariq Khalid ibn Salama, and Bahiyya. So Bahi also is Abdullah ibn Bashar, and Awrah, and Aisha, Rata'ala an Hakada Mawsulan. So the hadith inside Muslim, it has a full, complete chain. Then he mentioned that, so that's concerning the narration inside Muslim and many other books, Abu Dawood, also with a complete chain, with a connected chain. So Mawsula, meaning it has a complete connected chain. Then he mentioned after علقه البخاري في موضعين, that Imam Bukhari rahimahullah, when he cited or mentioned this hadith in his Sahih, Jami' al-Sahih, he mentioned this hadith twice in this Jami', in two places. As we mentioned that one, Bukhari rahimahullah at times mentioned one hadith in several places. So this hadith is mentioned in Sahih Bukhari in two separate places. One, Kitab al-Hayd, and also second in Kitab al-Adhan. So Bukhari rahimahullah, he mentioned this hadith with mu'allakan in both places with an incomplete chain. One in Kitab al-Hayd and second Kitab al-Adhan. Then he mentioned that so that's concerning this particular hadith regarding then he mentioned what is mu'allaka. So it is stated that Imam Bukhari rahimahullah mentioned the hadith mu'allaka. So this is a terminology of those terms that are used by the ulama of hadith regarding a certain that to describe a particular type of isnad. So it's a terminology used by the ulama of hadith regarding in reference to a particular type of isnad, and that type of isnad that it would means that the isnad, it is an incomplete isnad. The missing link of the isnad, meaning the missing narrators are from the side of the collector of that book of hadith. So in this case Imam Bukhari, him also mu'allaka, as they will mention that hadaf or isqat rawi fa akthar min al-isnad, with a person, the collector of the book, that he had skipped or dropped, did not mention one or more narrators, and maybe the entire isnad not mention the narrator, then he will cite the hadith, or he just cite the Sahaba. Qala Abu Hurairah, qala Aisha, without qala fulan, then he mentioned the hadith. So from the side of the narrator, or from the side of the collector, that he has dropped certain of the narrators from his side. So he mentioned regarding concerns, that's concerning hadith al-mu'allaka. They have a discussion regarding also second with hadith mu'allaka or taliq, that this indicate that there's a weakness in the isnad because the hadith is with an incomplete isnad. So that also is a sign that isnad is weak. But with the ulama regarding Sahih Bukhari, that they approach those hadith different. Where Bukhari rahimahullah in this case, as he mentioned, that you have books that are dedicated regarding mu'allaqat in Sahih Bukhari. So this book by Ibn Hajar rahimahullah, that is called Taghliq at-Ta'liq ala Sahih al-Bukhari, where he wrote this book, Ibn Hajar rahimahullah, where he discussed all those hadith that are said to be ta'liq and other hadith that are mentioned in Sahih Bukhari. So the hadith which is said to be with an incomplete chain by Bukhari in his Sahih, that Ibn Hajar rahimahullah, that he gathered all those hadith and then he discussed those hadith. And That's concerning that work that is done by Ibn Hajar in relation to the book of Sahih Bukhari, in particular in relation to a hadith that are mu'allaka with an incomplete chain. So as we said that this hadith, but also it is found in other place. So they mentioned that this particular hadith that is cited by Imam Bukhari rahimahullah in his Sahih, it is mentioned two places, Kitab al-Hayd, menstruation, and also Kitab al-Adhan, the book of calling the Adhan for Salat. And in both cases they are mentioned mu'allaka with an incomplete chain, and they are so they are not per se mentioned in another place with a complete chain. That's not the case with Bukhari. In this one, they mention a reason of why Imam Bukhari rahimahullah did so. One, that this hadith is not according to his condition. So this hadith is not according to the condition set by Bukhari regarding particular hadith that he used in his book. So this hadith, it forfeit its condition, but it is still mentioned as a supplementary hadith. Second, or supporting hadith. Second, that he mentioned this hadith, Imam Bukhari rahimahullah, so I mentioned that it is not according to his condition, so that's of the reason why it is mentioned, not according to his condition. So that's concerning that of the reason why the hadith is mentioned by Bukhari rahimahullah in his Sahih. But also find other sources that have mentioned the hadith with a complete chain. So you find other sources that have mentioned the hadith with a complete chain, amongst them Abu Dawood, Tirmidhi, Ibn Majah, Ibn Hibban, and others. So overall the hadith is considered to be Sahih, authentic. So a person who is regarding concerning that, so you find hadith mu'allaka in Sahih Bukhari, they occur many. There's numerous hadith of that type in Sahih Bukhari. But as for Sahih Muslim, that he does so, hadith which is mu'allaka, only few cases. So very rarely does Imam Muslim does this, but Imam Bukhari rahimahullah, he does this frequent. Imam Bukhari, he does this frequent in his Sahih. But also the hadith is not according to Imam Bukhari rahimahullah condition, but it still fulfill the criteria and the condition of others, and also condition of authenticity. So as we mentioned that after narrating this hadith, Bahihi is the one who somewhat is the one that is they said Madar al-Hadith. The hadith it focused on this particular narrator, who many others have narrated his hadith from him. As for that's concerning that discussion regarding the hadith, so the hadith is considered to be authentic. The hadith is collected by Imam Muslim. It may not be to the full criteria of Imam Bukhari, but he mentioned the hadith mu'allakan because of it's not according to his criteria, and a form of supporting evidence regarding other hadith that are mentioned. So this hadith, mawdu of this particular hadith, this hadith is still discussing regarding that is this hadith, the mawdu of this hadith in bab of nawaqil al-wudu is al-dhikr yashtarit fihi al-wudu. Does having tahara a criteria in making of dhikr? So the person wish to mention the dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is it required that the person must be in a state of tahara? So if the person is not in a state of tahara, then is he not allowed to make the dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? So this is the discussion. So he's discussing with this hadith as the previous hadith, that there are certain condition, that certain actions, is it required that one must be in a state of tahara for them to perform these acts? So of this, mas al-musaf, as we discussed previously, carrying of the musaf, and we discussed this matter. Then the next of those matters is making of a dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The next matter that is discussed in this particular explanation regarding shar al-alfaz. So explaining some of the wordings mentioned in the hadith. So Aisha anha, she mentioned, Kan Rasulullah alayhi salam yadhkur Allah, that the Prophet alayhi salam, the Messenger of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that he used to mention Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They mentioned that yadhkur kana, the word kana in this context, it means concerning tadul ala kathrat at-tikrar, that's something that is done often and repeatedly and frequently. So the word kana, it indicates what can be derived from it is that it's an act that is done repeatedly and regularly and often. So the Prophet ﷺ would do this a lot regarding this practice, which is yadhkurullah, that he will mention Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So they mentioned that he would do this a lot. So meaning concerned that more than that, often enough he would perform this act of the mention of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in as often as possible. Then I mentioned yadhkurullah, that regarding concerning what is intended, al-murad, bi-dhikrillah, as to what is meant in this context regarding dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is mention Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's name. So mention Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's name or supplicant. And I mentioned that as for what is intended regarding concerning kullama yudhakkir billahi ta'ala, anything that a person that can be mentioned as a remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that will include at-tasbih, tahmid, tahleel, takbir, istighfar, tilawatul Quran. So all of these are ways of remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So all of these will include the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So all of these are included in dhikrullah subhanahu wa ta'ala. All of these ways are different ways of remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the person saying subhanallah, alhamdulillah, Allahu Akbar, la ilaha illallah, astaghfirullah. So all of these, tilawatul Quran. So all of these are different forms of la hawla la quwwata illa billah. So all of these type of statements are a form of dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Included in this would be qira'atul Quran or tilawatul Quran, the person reciting of the Quran. So they mentioned that the farq of dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is general. Tilawatul Quran is one of those acts and a specific case. It's one of those acts, one of those ways of the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So they mentioned ala kulli ahyani, that the Prophet ﷺ would do so ala kulli ahyan. Ahyan mentioned ala is dhurfiyya bimana fi. So ala kulli ahyani, ala in this context it is dhurfiyya, and by this it means fi, meaning instead of, you can replace the word ala with fi kulli ahyani. So in all times, and it's all times that in all times we are concerned that that ahyan meaning heen, which is awqat. So regarding concerned, he spent a lot of his time in the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, spend a lot of his time in the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So they mentioned regarding concerning that, so this regarding the Prophet of Islam in general, that he will spend a lot of time in the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and also he will do so with the Prophet concerning the dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that it will be done, that whether he's walking, whether he's standing, whether he's sitting. So the Prophet ﷺ, when he is lying, so the Prophet ﷺ, whenever that he has the opportunity, that he will make mention of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this will be done walking, sitting, waiting for others, even sitting with others, when lying. All of this is a part of the dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So they mentioned, the Shaykh went on to mention regarding concern, as for this hadith, that this is the hadith, is to indicate, they mention the next matter regarding this hadith. So he mentioned, al-hadithu dalilun ala anna dhikrullah subhanahu wa ta'ala la tashtarit lahu tahara. So the matter is regarding that, as the ulama mentioned regarding, that from this hadith, what can be taken from the hadith is that the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it is not required for one to be in a state of tahara. So it's not a condition, it's not conditional, it's not a must that one has to be in a state of tahara if the person want to say subhanallah, alhamdulillah. So to do these type of adhkar is not required for the person to be in a state of tahara. So the person can do so whether he's in a state of tahara or he's not in a state of tahara. Whether the person in a state of tahara or not in a state of tahara. Then a discussion between the ulama regarding the state that we'll discuss, and we discuss further separately, that the matter regarding the person concerned, that what the person is allowed regarding hadith al-akbar wal hadith al-asghar. So the person in a state of major impurity, is there now restriction? So the person in a state of minor impurity, to mention Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and as we'll mention even reciting of the Quran, that it is jaiz. So the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in al-hadith al-asghar, in minor impurities, it is something which is allowed. Then the discussion between the ulama is the person who is in a state of hadith al-akbar, in major impurity, janaba, he is required to perform ghusl, to be in a state of tahara. Is that person, while in a state of janaba, hadith al-akbar, is the person allowed to read of the Quran? So you find, that matter will be discussed separately in more detail regarding that particular matter. So the author rahimahullah, that is intention, Allahu alam, in bringing this hadith is regarding after he discuss is the matter then is to discuss he mentioned this hadith discuss regarding that is it a requirement for a person to be in a state of tahara regarding the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and also we'll discuss specifically regarding tilawatul Quran. So I mentioned that so from this to clarify that nawaqil al-wudu, not being in a state of tahara, that it does not stop the person from the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It doesn't forbid the person from the mention of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the person wishes to eat and they want to say Bismillah. The person wants to sit and they want to do their own tasbih, Subhanallah, Alhamdulillah, Allahu Akbar. Then if the person is not in a state of tahara, they can do so. So the person, if they are riding on the bus, on the train, the person in their car, the person walking, the person sitting, the person standing, that the person who wish to make mention of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but is not in a state of tahara, is allowed to do so. He's allowed to do so. So regarding concerning Adatul Asghar, then an ijma between the ulama, it is permissible. Regarding minor impurity, there's an ijma between the ulama that a person is allowed to do so. As for the state of major impurity, that in the bab of ghusl, that discussion will be mentioned in more detail. So in the bab of ghusl, this matter will be discussed more in detail. But also you have an exception, where the Prophet ﷺ regarding certain exception, where even the hadith seems general, but also, which is but you have mukhassis. You have certain things that will restrict this. Regarding that, the person have certain restrictions, where the person is, the Prophet ﷺ will not mention Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala due to certain situation. So of those restrictions, in the mention of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that I mentioned, tilawatul Quran. So there's certain discussion regarding had janaba in the state of hadith al-akbar, that in reciting the Quran, then there's a discussion, is the person allowed to do so or not? So you have the ulama who mention a person is not allowed. That's the qawl of jumhur of the ulama, that a person in the state of hadith al-akbar, major impurity, janaba have occurred, that a person that is not allowed to recite the Quran. And this type of dhikr is verbal dhikr, so something which is done with the lisan. So this type of dhikr, regarding that what is intended, the person mention Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala name, but by way of his tongue. So it is something that is said verbally. So as we said, of the exception and a discussion between ulama, tilawatul Quran, that will be discussed further regarding the state of hadith al-akbar. As for hadith al-asghar, then they are more lenient and they give permissibility. But jumhur take the position it's not allowed for a person who in a state of hadith al-akbar, major impurity, that they should read the Quran. Then they include by this, by way of al-hayd wal nifas. So also of those things that will be included regarding in a discussion of reciting the Quran, is it allowed or not for the lady who's in her menstrual cycle, is she allowed to recite the Quran, or the one who's nifas, the one after child bleeding. So also those things to be discussed further. Then you have others who said it is allowed for a person, it's not a requirement that it is allowed for a person to still recite the Quran, even if they are in hadith al-akbar. But that matter we said will be discussed further in the bab of ghusl, where that will be discussed in more detail bi'awnillahi ta'ala. Also they mention regarding the person where the restrictions, where the person that in the person qada al-haja, when a person is akramakumullah, the person that is fulfilling is the call of nature, as it is referred to. So the person who is fulfilling the call of nature, the person's doing number one or number two, then in that case the Prophet Islam, he used to not mention Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala until after he has completed. So while the person is fulfilling the call of nature, then a person not to mention Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's name. And so that's also of those exception on this matter. Or a person, a place that is najis, so the person, an area that is najis. So those exception regarding that matter. So overall concerning that, those are exception to the case. With the Prophet ﷺ, that they mentioned that he ﷺ at times will not mention Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala while he's doing a certain thing. So it includes the person. They mention that fulfilling the call of nature, or the person is having intimacy with their wife. Then also it is not to be done. But before the person start, it will mention Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's name. Then it mentioned that of those who prove that matter regarding the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, that he was urinating or calling the call of nature, where they mentioned فقال, where someone gave him salam and the Prophet ﷺ did not respond. فقال إني كرهت أن أذكر الله عز وجل إلا على طهر. That the Prophet ﷺ mentioned this hadith that I mentioned على طهارة. That wal hadith in the Abu Dawood in the Ashabu Sunan wal hadith sahih. That the Prophet ﷺ that he mentioned the hadith of Muhajir, where he gave the salam to the Prophet ﷺ while he was fulfilling the call of nature, urinating, and the Prophet ﷺ did not respond. Then he went back and explained that he did not respond based upon he did not like to mention Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala while not in a state of tuhrin. So that's because in Bab al-istihbab. So he mentioned that is not sabab of his preferred, but not wajib. So the Prophet ﷺ explained to him the reason why he did not return his salam. So as-salam, so it will include concerning salam, that but at that time he was urinating. So at that time he was fulfilling the call of nature, so he did not respond to the salam. As the salam, it consists concerning the dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Assalamu alaikum. So at that time he did not respond to the salam. So it shows that exception. At times the exception is discussed as being wajib, the ruling, and also at times it is something which is mustahab, preferred, that the act are done while the person is in state of tahara. And as we discussed concerning calling the adhan and the iqamah, as these are also the form of dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, so those also be discussed in their separate places. But overall this hadith discusses that matter regarding that the Prophet ﷺ always try to mention Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on all case and situation, except when on certain occasion and situation. Then Sheikh Abdul Rahman Al-Barraq, Hafidullah Ta'ala wa Ra'ahu, he mentioned regarding in his explanation or ta'liqat of the book Bulugh Maram, that he mentioned that, quick points he mentioned, that of the fawahid that can be taken from hadith, he mentioned istihbab al-dhikr ala kulli hal, that it is something which is mustahab for a person to mention Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala at all times. وفي كل حين, so at all times and all situations, a person always try to remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So as we mentioned, the person walking, sitting, riding, lying, not doing, the person to mention Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Then it mentioned that أن المطلق الذكر لا تشترط له طهارة, that general dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not require tahara, lakin tustahab, but it is something which is mustahab, but it's something which is preferred, it's something which is preferred. Then also he discussed concerning of this matter jawaz khirat al-Quran lil-muhdith haddath al-asghar, and also it is permissible that one is allowed to recite the Quran for a person in a state of haddath al-asghar, minor impurity. The person in a state of minor impurity, min ghayri an yamassa al-mushaf, without a person touching the Quran. And we previously discussed regarding the hukum between the ulama in relation to the person touching the Quran not in a state of tahara. So is it a requirement for a person also to be in a state of tahara for them to touch the Quran? Then as for al-junub wal-adath al-akbar, then that matter to be discussed further bi-idhnillahi ta'ala. Then also he mentioned of the matter istihbab kathrat al-dhikr, that a person also that he tries to make dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as often as possible. So the person tries to make dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as often as possible. Allah mentioned وَذَاكِرِينَ اللَّهَ كَثِيرًا وَالذَّاكِرَاتِ. So Allah mentioned وَالذَّاكِرِينَ, as for those who, the male who mention Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala often, and also the female. So this is encouraged for both male and female to mention Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as often as possible. And also he mentioned fifth regarding that the Prophet ﷺ as an example, kathrat al-dhikr, that he always mentioned Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as often as possible. And that dhikr bil lisan, and this type of dhikr is with the tongue, not in the heart as people may claim. And also the dhikr, that it is afdal, and even also the wajib, the person to avoid regarding what we call a tasbih. So this tasbih that is used by the people, that this dhikr bead, then also said that no, then this from the Prophet never used to use of this thing. That's not the ulama, only to be something not to be used. A minority of the ulama of the sunnah, that they mention that if the person find it difficult to use his hand, which is afdal wa akmal, which is better for the person to use his hand, that the person may have problem memorizing with memory, then they can use the dhikr because of their situation. the person who is old in age, that in this use of tasbih, especially regarding certain times after certain time requires the person to say set number, but overall for the person to avoid the use of the tasbih. So overall for the person to avoid the use of tasbih, the Prophet of Islam didn't use it, nor the Salaf, and we mentioned the ulama, they discuss even written books regarding is it permissible or not. So overall, to mention Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as he would do with his tongue and if time on his finger, but to avoid these different things that have been introduced that need to be reviewed. So that inshallah ta'ala will end this discussion regarding today's lecture or today's lesson or session regarding continuation of the book Bulugh al-Maram by Hafiz ibn Asir al-Asqalani rahimahullah, which is able to discuss concerning fiqh, but by way of the approach of the muhaddith, by way of mention a hadith relating to fiqh related topic. So that inshallah ta'ala will end. وبالله تعالى توفيق وهادي إلى السبيل والآخر دعوانا الحمد لله. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.